So I put together a nice compilation of information, again, about who really runs the world and how, focusing on the gold issue, and that's how the book came about.
Really good. Full title is Who Really Owns Your Gold? And the subtitle is The Intended Global Meltdown of 2012. We're kind of in the thick of it right now, of course, but what would you say a little bit to preface this topic about gold and the importance of gold? There's a long history here. You cover it in some of the beginning of your book, and kind of, I guess, how we've ended up in the situation where we are today. It's a big topic, of course, but maybe you can kind of summarize that a little bit for us.
Well, you've got a few questions in there, and they're wide-ranging. But let me just discuss the title itself. Who really owns your gold? It's owned by a group of dynastic men in Rome, and it's not the Vatican. And gold itself, of course, has been a very precious commodity, and it's been the only real money that ever was. Why it wasn't platinum or silver or some other precious metal or even some gem or some other material object, I'm not certain. But people have always, at least humans, have always worshipped the power of gold. The book itself is not so much about gold, but it's who really runs this world of ours and how they do it. And it's really with respect to the United States and our history, our government, our social structure, military structure. So, and it's also a short book. I call it a 69-minute book, which is a new line of books we have. And it's a book you can read in about an hour. And if you read a little fast, then you can probably get there. But it's meant to be short and sweet and very dense, uranium dense, and packed with lots of energy, high voltage information about, again, who really runs the world and how.
Do you want to tell us a little bit more about the men in Rome who actually is behind this and how you came to this conclusion?
Yes, well, yeah, that's the punchline. I mean, who really owns everything and who runs everything? For thousands of years, all roads have led to Rome in one way or the other. And since about 1541, the Society of Jesus, or the Jesuits, have sent out, they've diffused their Jesuits all over the world and ingratiated themselves with royalty and with the highest government officials, and slowly taken over every single government, every monetary system, every economic system, every social system. So those are the folks today and people argue with me all the time about this. I mean, how could they possibly do that? Well, if you read their history, if you study their history very carefully, and it doesn't take that much studying, I'm thinking maybe 100 hours. If every person out there, the people I refer to as we the people, every good person in the world would just take about 100 hours and study the patterns of the Society of Jesus, you would have no problem coming to the same conclusions that I have, because there have been books out there that have been written over the past several hundred years, in particular, say the past 150 to 200 years, all of which have been suppressed, by the way, that show definitively all the patterns of their behavior, that show definitively that these people have their tried and true methods that they use to subjugate the will and the rights of people all over, and have done it in almost every single country on this planet.
And yet, Dean, we hear today that their power, is at least a Catholic Church, maybe not addressed directly the Jesuits per se, but that their power and influence is diminishing and the role is largely symbolic today. What would you say to that?
Well, then we get into the study of religion and the topic of religion. And I usually try to avoid that because religion to me is all false. It was designed as a means of control more than 2,000 years ago. If you study the basic Bibles of all religions, they all pretty much have the same theme, and it looks like they came from the same place. They took the same story, the same information from the same person or persons who originally wrote it. The Jesuits have had soldiers, and they are a militant army, by the way. They've had soldiers whose sole responsibility has been to rewrite various passages in every Bible across the world. And which is probably one of the most dangerous things you can do, because if you control a religion, you control the people. And if you control the people, you control the society and everything else in it. Mm. So, again, I try to avoid the topic of religion itself, because these people don't represent the Catholic Church. They don't represent Muslims. They don't represent Judaism. They use religion as a tool, as a controlling method to keep we the people in a certain place wherever they want. They steer us in various directions wherever the need be. And again, still using religion as a tool. But the Catholic religion, even though it may have lost a few members over the years, as you were suggesting there, it doesn't matter to the Jesuits, because one of the faces of the Society of Jesus is the Catholic Church. And it really doesn't necessarily matter whether they control through the Catholic Church, because they have other means of control. They can control socially, economically, politically. And even though the Catholic Church has been their primary means of control, they certainly control just about all other religions. So it really doesn't matter whether the Catholics have lost a few followers here and there.
Okay. Now, what do you see as America's role in this, and if there is any interface between the Jesuits and the Catholic Church and America?
Well, the United States is really the last bastion of freedom and liberty in the world. Every other country has been brought to its knees. They are under the fold. They're in the fold. They're under the control of the Jesuits. And America, since its inception, and back then it was referred to as the New World, since its inception has been a focus of control by the Jesuits. They sent people here to set up the first central bank, and they did it with their accountants, the Rothschild family. And the Rothschilds have been their accountants since, late 1700s, as far as I know. And so the Jesuits sent armies of men to help set up the first central bank. They used the Rothschild bastard, Alexander Hamilton, who I say is not a traitor to the country, because the country is just a corporation, but he's a traitor to we the people. And they also got ingratiated themselves to the highest levels of the U.S. government, the state governments, and they slowly took over control of the government and steered the United States of America in various directions, wherever they wanted it to go. The idea has been to bring all of America into their fold, to have full control over the social, political, military, economic status and systems here in this country. And over the past 10 years alone, they have almost met their goal. And I think the past 10 years have been a very, very telling time in our history, because they have ramped up, the Jesuits and their accountants, the House of Rothschild, they've ramped up, or they've had to ramp up their machinations to coincide with certain celestio-physical events out there beyond Earth.
That's interesting. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Well, the celestiophysics, it's my term, but it's really a bastardization of celestial physics. I like to use it as one word, celestiophysics. It is the study of the physics of celestial and solar and lunar bodies and their effects on geophysical and biophysical events and activities, actions on Earth.
Absolutely. Now, okay, to counter a little bit there and to play the other side of this, many people argue, of course, that there's other people in charge primarily of the banking system, with as you said before, with the Rothschilds being in charge, the Rockefellers, the Morgans of the world, and some people say it's a Jewish banking conspiracy. What is the interface then between these different groups out there, if you will, that many people are looking at, and how how is the connection, if you will, between something like the Rothschilds and the Jesuits? Because that's seemingly, at least on from the outside, kind of that's an opposition almost there. You'd think.
Yeah, it's counterintuitive. I agree, but the fact is, these people aren't religious, and if they are, they worship some pagan demon. And I do not say that with tongue in cheek. I'm quite serious about expressing that sentiment. The Jesuits themselves have always stayed underground, and they've had public faces. The public faces have been their controlled politicians, their controlled social faces. Nowadays, like the people in Hollywood, and we have all the stars and actors, actresses, and other members of the media who are the public faces, the public voice of the Jesuits. The Rothschilds themselves, the House of Rothschild, a very clever family. They're anything but Jewish. They're I call them Khazar Jews from the old land Khazaria, which is now Russian Georgia, and I've known and spoken with whistleblowers within their organization who said they don't practice any Judaism whatsoever. Their public face is, yes, that of these very wealthy Jews. However, they're anything but Jewish by any standard whatsoever. So, again, the Jesuits tend to stay underground, and they've had public faces. Now, you have to have a public face out there, especially when you're trying to control something, because you need a target for we the people to throw something at and to scream at, and also to revere. So the House of Rothschild and these other great organizations, and I don't mean great as in magnanimous, I mean great as in simply large and huge. These other organizations, they have sort of ingratiated themselves into our society and with our people, with we the people especially, by philanthropic organizations and by having established philanthropy in general in the U.S. because they give away so much and they do help people, at least indirectly. And so this public face turns out to be sort of double-sided. We have on one side the philanthropy, and on the other side it's an evil machination that follows the book of the Society of Jesus, the Jesuits.
Now, you say in your book, of course, that as a quote from J.P. Morgan, that money really is, or gold really is, the money. Is there any history
Everything
to that?
Else is credit.
Right, exactly. That's what he says. Yeah.
Yeah, and almost exactly 100 years ago to the month, J.P. Morgan sat in some congressional hearing, and he said, "Gold is money. Everything else is credit." And he was really just sort of poking us in the eye and rubbing our nose in the fact that he controlled the money system in the United States by the good grace of the Society of Jesus. And he was revealing what should have stayed and remained a secret, that yes, gold is in fact the only form of money, not just in the United States, but all over the world. Gold is the only form of money. Everything else is credit, which means that we, and I'm speaking as J.P. Morgan right now, which means that we can print money out of thin air, create money out of thin air. We can issue loans and other forms of credit. We can collect interest on those loans, all that credit, when the principal didn't even exist. So again, he was really rubbing our nose on the fact that he and the Jesuits controlled the money system, and they could get rich off us via this credit.
And how did they pull this off, do you think? And because it's a pretty interesting system, as you said before. It seems like mankind has venerated gold. They've had that for a long time as the transaction. So it seems to me then that early in the game, the Jesuits, as you argue, and also then later through the agents, being J.P. Morgan, Rothschilds, Rockefellers, etc., have gotten in on this game and basically tried to take over the gold of the world. Is that pretty much how it's played out in your view?
Yes. And again, because they have seen that gold is the true money, hoarding gold has been their objective.